Welcome back to the channel. Have you ever heard a story where right from the very beginning you just know something is wrong? A story where every detail, every piece of the puzzle, instead of clarifying the truth, only pulls you deeper into a thick fog of mystery? Today we're going to travel back in time to a fateful Christmas Eve, a night that should have been filled with laughter, lights, and warmth, but was instead engulfed by a horrific fire and a question that has haunted America for nearly 80 years. What happened to the 5 Sodder children? This isn't just a story about a house fire. This is a story of a family torn apart, of bizarre clues that were ignored, and of a search that would never end. So get ready, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything. Part 1. A peaceful night before the storm. It all begins in Fayetteville, West Virginia, in 1945. The Sodder family was a picture of the American dream. George Sodder, an immigrant from Italy, had worked hard to build a successful trucking company. He and his wife Jenny had a total of 10 children. They were a large, loud, happy family, well respected in their community. However, George was an outspoken man. He never hesitated to voice his strong criticisms of the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. In a community with many Italian immigrants, this earned him a few enemies. But no one could have imagined it might be the seed for an unthinkable tragedy. It was Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1945. The atmosphere in the Sodder home was cozy. Marion, the eldest daughter, had just come home from work, bringing new toys for her younger siblings. 5 of the younger children, Maurice, age 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5, begged their mother to let them stay up a little later to play with their new gifts. Jenny smiled and agreed. "All right," she said, "but remember to feed the cows and put the chickens away before you go to bed." That night, strange events began to unfold. Small, eerie signs that in hindsight felt like omens. Around 9 p.m., the phone rang. Marion answered. On the other end of the line was a woman she didn't recognize, asking for a name she'd never heard. Marion said they had the wrong number, but she could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses in the background, as if from a party. A simple wrong number. Or was it something else? Around 12:30 a.m., Jenny woke up to the phone ringing again. It was the same woman, her voice slurring as if she was drunk. Jenny told her she had the wrong number again, and hung up. As she went back to bed, she noticed the lights downstairs were still on and the front door was unlocked. She assumed the children, in their excitement, had forgotten. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and went back to sleep, not knowing those were her family's last moments of peace. At around 1 a.m., Jenny was woken again. This time, it wasn't the phone. It was a strange sound, a loud thump on the roof, followed by a rolling noise. She didn't think much of it and drifted back to sleep. Just 30 minutes later, she jolted awake. The room was thick with smoke. George's office was on fire. She screamed, waking her husband and the older children sleeping nearby. George, Jenny, and 4 of the children, John, George Jr., Marion, and the youngest Sylvia, scrambled out of the burning house. But once they were safely outside, a horrifying realization hit them. The other 5 children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were still asleep in the attic, right in the heart of the inferno. Panic turned to desperate action. George ran to the side of the house to get the tall ladder he always kept there. With it, he could climb to the attic window and save his children. But the ladder was gone. It wasn't there. Not giving up, George had another idea. He owned 2 large coal trucks. He could drive one up to the house and climb on top to reach the window. He ran to the first truck, turned the key. Nothing. He tried again. The truck wouldn't start. He ran to the second one. The same result. Both trucks, which had been working perfectly the day before, were now mysteriously dead. Their final effort was to use water. They had a large rain barrel, but the night was freezing cold. The water inside was frozen solid. In a desperate rush, Marion ran to a neighbor's house to call the fire department. But when she picked up the phone, there was no dial tone. The line was dead. Imagine the absolute helplessness of the Sodder family in that moment, standing there in the freezing cold of Christmas night, forced to watch helplessly as the fire consumed their home, and with it, their 5 children. The fire department, for some reason, didn't arrive until 8 o'clock the next morning, when all that was left was a smoking hole in the ground where the basement used to be. The tragedy had happened, but the story was only just beginning. The next morning, as the Sodder family grieved, the official investigation began. The fire chief, F.J. Morris, after a swift 2-hour inspection, gave his conclusion. The fire was caused by faulty wiring, and the 5 children, he said, had been completely incinerated by the intense heat. There was nothing left. Death certificates were issued. The case was closed. But for Jenny Sodder, something wasn't right. A mother's intuition told her there was more to the story. First, the remains. She began her own research. She spoke to an employee at a local crematorium who confirmed that even in a 2,000-degree Fahrenheit fire lasting 2 hours, human bones always remain. A fire in a wooden house could not possibly have gotten hot enough to completely destroy 5 sets of skeletons without leaving a single bone, a single tooth, or any trace at all. To prove her point, Jenny conducted her own experiments. She burned chicken bones, cow bones, and pork bones in a stove. Every single time the bones were left behind. Second, the smell. No one at the scene, including the Sodders, recalled smelling burning flesh, a distinct and unmistakable odor in fires with human casualties. Third, the appliances. As George began to clear the debris, he found household appliances like the stove and refrigerator nearly intact in the ashes. If the fire was hot enough to vaporize human bone, how did these metal objects survive? The Sodder suspicion grew. They believed this was not an accident. They believed their children did not die in that fire. They believed they had been kidnapped. And then, other pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, strengthening their conviction. A bus driver who passed through Fayetteville that night testified that he had seen someone throwing balls of fire at the Sodder house. The youngest daughter, Sylvia, later found a small, hard, dark green rubber object in the yard, an object resembling the casing of a napalm bomb or a pineapple bomb. A telephone repairman confirmed that the family's phone line had not been burned through. It had been deliberately cut high up on the utility pole. And perhaps most disturbingly, they recalled the events leading up to the fire. A few months prior, a stranger had come by asking for work, but had walked to the back of the house and pointed at the 2 fuse boxes. "This is going to cause a fire someday," he told George. George found this odd, as he had just had the wiring completely redone and inspected. Another man, claiming to be in Part 4, The Lifelong Search. Huber. George and Jenny Sodder did something unforgettable. They erected a massive billboard on the highway near their home. On it were the faces of their 5 missing children, along with a reward for any information leading to their recovery. That billboard stood there, a silent testament to an unresolved tragedy for over 30 years. They traveled the country chasing every lead, no matter how small. Sightings were reported. One woman claimed to have served them breakfast at a diner 50 miles away, saying they were with 2 men and 2 women who appeared to be of Italian descent. Another woman from St. Louis, Missouri, wrote to the Sodders claiming that Martha, the eldest missing daughter, was living in a convent there. A guest at a Charleston hotel saw the children's pictures in the paper and told police she had seen 4 of the 5 children in a room at the hotel just a week after the fire. They were with 2 men and 1 woman, all of Italian extraction, she recounted. "I tried to be friendly with the children, but the adults were very hostile and wouldn't let me get close to them. But when police investigated, they found nothing. The months turned into years, the years into decades. Hope began to fade. But then, in 1967, more than 20 years after the fire, a haunting clue arrived. The Sodders received a letter postmarked from Kentucky with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of a young man in his late 20s. He had dark curly hair, dark eyes, and a straight nose. As the Sodders looked at the photo, their hearts stopped. The man was the spitting image of their son, Louis, had he lived to grow up. On the back of the photo was a cryptic, handwritten message. Louis Sodder, I love. Brother Frankie, Illil. Boys, A90132 or 35. They hired another private investigator to look into the letter, but the investigator took their money and was never heard from again. The Sodders never gave up. George passed away in 1969 and Jenny in 1989. They both went to their graves believing their children were still out there somewhere. The billboard was finally taken down after Jenny's death, but the story and the questions remain. So, what really happened on that fateful Christmas Eve? Did the 5 children truly perish in the fire? And were all the strange details just a series of bizarre coincidences? Was this an act of revenge by the Italian mafia targeting George for his outspoken views? Were they kidnapped and raised somewhere else under different identities? And was the man in the photograph really Louis Sodder? To this day, the case of the Sodder children remains one of the greatest and most heartbreaking mysteries in American crime history. It is a testament to the unending love of a parent and a chilling reminder that sometimes the truth is far stranger and more terrifying than any fiction. What do you think happened? Leave your theories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most frightening stories are the ones that are true.